The other week, I released a sample/preset pack called Embrace Bass, which was 20 bass sounds made from Ableton native synths and instrument racks geared towards genres like drum and bass, glitch hop, dubstep, these kind of bass-heavy production styles. So I wanted to take a minute and talk about how I approach these sounds and how you could take a similar approach in your sound design to get those wonky, neuro, warbly bass sounds. Let's get started. By the way, if you are interested in that sample/preset pack, I will leave a link in the description to my Patreon. All $1 and up patrons get access to the pack. Not only that pack, but all previous packs too. So it's just $1, you get a lot of bang for your buck. Plus, I would really appreciate the support. The first step in all of this is you want to pick a synthesizer. I have chosen Wavetable, which is Ableton's Wavetable synthesizer, appropriately named, but there are of course other options. There is analog, there is operator, there's collision, there's tension. All of them have their advantages and their disadvantages, but for this example I'm going to be using Wavetable. And the next thing you want to do is you want to double group it. So by selecting the instrument and hitting Control G or Command G on a Mac, and then doing the same thing again. So we have a group within a group. The next thing we want to do is map our A, D, S, and R to macros 5, 6, 7, and 8 in our instrument rack, in the outermost instrument rack, because remember we have an instrument rack nested inside of another instrument rack. So I'll show you how to do that real fast. You come over here, you right click on the A, and you click on map to macro 5, and then you go over to that macro, you right click again, and click map to macro 5 again to make sure that we are controlling this from the outermost macros on the nested instrument racks, and we will do the same thing. Oops, I meant to do that on macro 6, and then macro 6, macro 7, and macro 8. So now we're actually going to get into designing the patch, and in doing so we're going to take a couple parameters, maybe more, and map them to macros 1 and 2, again the outermost macros, so that when we're actually using this patch in our productions we have some means by which to accentuate the patch or give it some movement, right? So I'm going to do a time lapse and then I'll show you which parameters I chose to map to those macros. Okay, so just a very, very short explanation of what I've done here. I got two oscillators. I got this fifth brutal. The position here is being modulated by macro 1, and on oscillator 2 it is the same thing, except this oscillator is an octave up. This first filter I have is a morphing filter, and the morph of it is being modulated by LFO1, and LFO1 is it's a synced LFO, so it is in time with the tempo of the song. So for example, right now it's in quarter notes, and I have the rate, the synced rate, mapped to macro 2. So, right now it's quarter notes, but I could turn it up to 16th notes. Then the second filter I have just doing some distortion. It's not actually doing any filtering. The second LFO is modulating the frequency of filter 1, and that is, and the frequency, or excuse me, the rate of LFO2 is mapped to macro 1. So as macro 1 gets turned down, it gets slower, and as it gets turned up, it gets faster. And then I have some unison here, just two voices, and then I have it monophonic. So just to show you some of the expressive capabilities of this patch so far. So we got something pretty all right, but we're going to be doing much more to it. So now we're going to take advantage of these nested instrument racks. If I go over to my innermost instrument rack and I click on these horizontal lines, we see all of the chains that are available in this instrument rack. Now I'm going to grab a sampler and I'm going to drag it in here so that we can layer a sample in with our synth. Now the sample I'm going to use is going to be something analogous to noise. It's going to be, you know, like footsteps in grass or like crowd ambience, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that. It could be, you know, like a brass stab or something that, you know, actually has a pitch so that you can tune it with your synth, just to give it like an extra layer. I am choosing to use it for noise, and that tends to be what I often use it for. And you'll see why that really helps out later in the process. So I'm going to grab something out of my miscellaneous audio hunt textures folder. Let's find some, let's go with some room tone. And I'm just going to grab one at random. So if you're not aware, room tone is just like the tone of a room. It's like, you know, a fan is going in the corner and there's some echoes down the hallway. It's effectively white noise. So let's listen to that just by itself. If I play it across the keyboard, it's very quiet. So it's just noise. Now there are a few things that we want to do with this noise layer. The first thing that I want to do is I want to map the ADSNR to the same ADSR macros that we did for the wavetable. So I'm just going to do that real fast. It takes no time at all. A, D, S, and R. And so now we can kind of treat the ADSR macros over here like they're one envelope between the wavetable and this noise layer. The next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that when I play this sample across the keys that it's going to stay the same pitch no matter what. That's very easy to do. All we do is go over to this parameter that says scale, and we hit 0 on our keyboard. And now when we play it, I'm playing it across the keyboard and it's, you know, it's not changing pitch. Another thing I want to do is I want to filter out all of the low end. I could do this with an EQ, but I'm just going to use a filter for now for the sake of time. I'm just going to use a high pass. So now, so this way when we layer it in with our wavetable, it just kind of gives it, just gives it a little bit of air. Oh, one more thing I want to do is I want to make sure that it's monophonic. And all I got to do is go over here to Voices in the drop-down menu and click 1. And then we're good to go. Now we're going to see what our noise layer and our synth sound like when they're together. So I'm just going to unsolo that noise. It's very subtle, but it really makes a difference, right? Now we're going to go into bus processing. This is when we take our noise layer and we take our synth layer and we're going to process them together so they kind of glue together. And in doing so, we kind of create more texture, make it sound a bit more lively, a bit more complex. So let's get into that. I am going to first start out with a simple saturator. And you want to make sure that when you place your audio effect in the chain that it is affecting both the noise layer and the wavetable. So you can see I've placed it, I guess, between the two nested instrument racks. So let's give it a little bit of drive here and turn the dry wet down. Let's make it a bit harder maybe. Kind of glues those sounds together. Another thing I want to add is a phaser, and I think that's going to be it. So let's grab a phaser, drop it here, get the dry wet pretty low, make it just a couple pulls. Turn the color up maybe. I'm also going to turn the this macro 1 down. We're also getting pretty close to clipping over here, so I'm just going to go back into our instrument, or our chains over here, instrument rack chains, and I'm going to turn each of these down by like 4 dB. Seems like plenty. Still pretty close, so I'm going to turn it down a bit more. And that's going to be it for the bus processing. So for the sake of time, I've done this second to last step off camera, and I'll just talk you through it. What I did was I took a Multiband Dynamics and I grouped it, and then I duplicated the chain 3 times, and then I renamed them high, mid, and low, and then in each of the respective Multiband Dynamics in these chains, I have soloed the highs, the mids, and the lows corresponding to the names I've given them. Now what this allows us to do is it allows us to split those bands and affect each of those bands differently. And this is what I really believe takes a good synth sound and makes it great. So in highs, I have used a pedal fuzz to just distort the living crap out of it. And then I've added an auto pan to kind of widen those highs, right? To almost make it sound like the bass is surrounding you. And then in the mids, just took a flanger. I kind of just wanted something simple, something that would just kind of change the phase relationship between that mid band and the high and the low. And then for the low, all I did was kind of lower the width. The last step is simply to compress everything together, glue it all together, make sure that it sounds cohesive. And all you need to do for that is grab the Multiband Dynamics preset, OTT, drag it after this Multiband Dynamics rack. In fact, let's collapse all this. And if you're not familiar with what OTT does, basically it just makes things sound nice and beefy and fat. It's almost like a sound goodizer. And then the other thing I'll do is I'm just going to put some light saturation before the OTT. Just like 3 dB, and turn the dry wet down on this analog clip. Now we can finally hear what our bass sounds like. So let's hear this bass sound in the context of a little beat I made. So I took our bass sound, I flattened it to audio, I high-passed it a little bit, and then I took a sine wave sub, and I just put that underneath, playing the same pitch. I put this little drum beat, gave it some side chaining, and it sounds like this. Thank you very much for watching. Obviously, these kind of bass sounds are really important to my production style, so I hope that you found these tips useful. If you're interested in the Embrace Bass sample pack, it will be available to $1 patrons. Link in the description. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things. Love to hear suggestions for things that you want to see on my live stream. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, social media stuff. I'll see you next time.